Well, good afternoon, Governor Branstad, Lieutenant Governor Reynolds, Attorney General Miller, members of the legislature, members of the Iowa Centennial Memorial Foundation, and ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for joining us today to honor a great Iowan and a man that many of us call a friend, Ambassador Ken Quinn. I've now known Ken for nearly 20 years, but the stars truly aligned in 1999 at our dinner in Washington, D.C., when Janice and I invited him to become president of the World Food Prize Foundation and accept the challenge of making it the Nobel Prize for Food and Agriculture. Ambassador Quinn accepted the challenge, and with his devotion and inexhaustible work, the organization grew into the internationally recognized institution that it is today. It has truly achieved Norman Borlaug and my father's vision of making the World Food Prize the Nobel Prize for Food and Agriculture. Now let's look at a few of my favorite, I guess, of Ken's accomplishments. First of all, you'd have to go back into the history of the prize, but it's the annual announcement of the World Food Prize laureate by the Secretary of State at the State Department in Washington. Next, the commissioning and placement of the Norman Borlaug statue in National Statuary Hall in the U.S. Capitol. And I think the one that's probably most important to me, and remember I'm only mentioning a few of Ken's favorites, is this, the magnificent Hall of Laureates. So I've always known Ambassador Quinn to be a true statesman, an advocate for Southeast Asia, but I was fortunate to witness his renown in the region firsthand. As a personal favor to me, Ken acted as our #1 resource when Janice and I were chairing a trip to Southeast Asia for the Chief Executive Organization in 2012. Planning for the trip required 2 pre-trips and 2 years of his time, and culminated in a fantastic voyage up the Mekong River with Lê Sun and an international group of 90 CEOs. He was able to open doors in Vietnam and Cambodia that made the experience so memorable to all of us. We were so proud to be with Ken as we discovered all the love and respect and admiration of those lives that he had touched. He is truly a rock star diplomat, and it's not surprising that he received a rating of 10 for his contribution of storytelling and a history of the region along with the journey. So we are honored to call Ken Quinn our dear friend and colleague. So if you will, please join with me in congratulating Ambassador Quinn on the Iowa Award. It's an honor so well deserved. There's a lot of things we're not supposed to do today that we're going to do, Ken. So. Now it's my pleasure to introduce another great Iowan who has demonstrated time and time again that she knows how to take the reins and get things done. With a work ethic similar to Governor Branstad, Lieutenant Governor Kim Reynolds has helped to attract $7.5 billion of private investment in Iowa, including major tech companies such as Facebook, Google, and Microsoft. She has also helped to encourage international partnerships with countries in Europe and Southeast Asia, and has made expanding access to STEM programs to underrepresented and underserved populations in Iowa a major priority while in office. I am proud to introduce Lieutenant Governor Kim Reynolds. Please join in helping me.
Well, good afternoon, and John, thank you for that nice introduction. And I have the honor of somewhat emceeing this afternoon's events, and it is truly an honor to be able to do that. We are all here today to honor and recognize an extraordinary Iowan, a man who wouldn't compromise his convictions or his morals in the face of danger. That man, of course, is Ambassador Quinn. During his long, honorable career, Ambassador Quinn has been shot at, he's been wounded, or in receipt of death threats in every foreign assignment he took on. But in the face of great adversity, he emerged as a highly decorated Foreign Service officer who is remembered and admired as an individual who fought for democracy, for justice, for equality, for human rights, and for philanthropy. Today, Ambassador Quinn becomes the 23rd Iowan to receive the Iowa Award. The award is to be presented to Ambassador Quinn this evening is the state's highest citizen award. The Iowa Centennial Memorial Foundation, established in 1948 by Robert D. Blue and the Iowa General Assembly, created the award. The foundation wished to encourage and recognize outstanding service of Iowans in the fields of science, medicine, law, religion, social welfare, education, agriculture, industry, government, and other public service, and to recognize the merit of their accomplishments in Iowa and throughout the United States. Now, with a resume like that of Ambassador Quinn's, we may need to amend that description of the Iowa Award to highlight the accomplishments of an individuals in Iowa, in the United States, and in Ambassador Quinn's case, around the globe. Since taking office as the Lieutenant Governor, I've had the opportunity to work with Ambassador Quinn on something that I am extremely passionate about, and that's science, technology, engineering, and math, or STEM. STEM education fits perfectly with the World Food Prize mission of recognizing those advancing food agriculture science and technology. We know the future generations of leaders in biosciences and food sciences, maybe even the next Norman Borlaug, must be equipped with an exceptional STEM education. The careers of tomorrow absolutely will require it. Under Ambassador Quinn's leadership, the World Food Prize and the Iowa Youth Institute is helping to achieve the Council's goal of expanding student interest and achievement in STEM fields. In today's world, teachers, students, parents, communities need to understand how the STEM fields are the basis for innovative problem solving and discovery, which are best acquired through exploratory learning and active student engagement. The Youth Institute embodies this goal. With the Borlaug-Ruan International Internship, more than 200 Iowa high school students have traveled to Asia, to Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East to work alongside renowned scientists at leading research centers. Ambassador Quinn, I want to say that we appreciate your work, your career, and your service, and it's an honor to be part of tonight's ceremony honoring you for this great award. Before we begin the formal ceremony, I'd like to first recognize previous Iowa Award winners with us today. Simon Estes was awarded this distinguished award in 1996. We have with us this evening Bill Knapp, who was awarded this award in 2001. And Governor Robert D. Ray was appropriately honored in 2005. Governor Ray. So Governor Ray formally nominated Ambassador Quinn for this prestigious award, and I have the pleasure this evening of sharing with you excerpts from that letter. I first met Ken Quinn on a cold Iowa night in the winter of 1976. When he came to a celebration we were holding for the Tai Dam refugees from Laos, whom we had welcomed to build new lives in Iowa following the end of the Vietnam War. Ken, who was a member of Henry Kissinger's National Security Council staff at that time, carried a letter from President Jerry Ford praising Iowa for the humanitarian example that we were setting. I was so impressed with his passionate presentation that when he sat down, I said to him, "We sure could use someone like you right here in the state of Iowa." But the most significant part of our journey came in January of 1979, when at Ken's urging, I returned to the office after a Drake basketball game to see a video recording of a special CBS report by Ed Bradley. It showed Vietnamese refugees in a frail boat on a remote stretch of coast in Southeast Asia being pushed back into the ocean by local officials who feared being overwhelmed by the flood of refugees escaping communism. We watched in horror as their flimsy boat broke apart in the waves with dozens of refugees falling into the sea and drowning. The problem was, as Ken explained it to me, that no country in the world, including the United States, was accepting any more refugees from Vietnam. These innocent boat people, refugees, were facing terrible fates from pirates, stormy weather, and if they survived these perils, being refused any safe harbor. That same night, Ken and I drafted a letter to President Carter that I signed and I made public the next morning. It said that Iowa would double the number of refugees we had accepted if only the president would reopen America's doors to accept those unfortunate boat people. Shortly thereafter, Ken and I went to Washington and we began the process of lobbying the White House and the National Security Council and the State Department to reverse its policy. Now, given his prior experience at the foreign affairs agencies, Ken knew where that we could be most effective. The result was that 6 months later, in June of 1979, Ken and I were part of the official U.S. delegation to the UN Conference on the Boat People in Geneva, Switzerland. There, Vice President Walter Mondale announced that henceforth the United States would accept 168,000 refugees a year from Indochina. 4 months later, in October 1979, shortly after the visit of Pope John Paul II, Ken proposed that I lead a group of governors to Thailand to assess the situation of refugees there. He was with me on that trip. However, we were not prepared for the level of human suffering that we encountered at a remote makeshift camp along the Thai-Cambodian border. There were 30,000 emancipated Cambodian refugees about a large open field with almost no shelter or flood. They were dying at the rate of 50 to 100 a day, with their bodies being bulldozed into mass graves. With Ken and Nikki Chazelle of my office providing the leadership, a fundraising campaign was launched in between Thanksgiving and Christmas, eventually raising over $600,000 in small, individual contributions from citizens all across this great state. This money was used to send food and medicine to desperate, starving Khmer people both along the border and deep inside Cambodia itself, with our first gifts arriving appropriately on Christmas Day. Iowa Shares also supported volunteer Iowa doctors and nurses who provided life-saving assistance to a makeshift hospital at the Thai border. This was an extraordinary humanitarian endeavor that lasted 2 years and deserves a special place in our state's history. Starving people were fed. Refugees live in freedom. Lives were saved. All that thanks to Ken Quinn. It was for all of these reasons that it was my great pleasure to nominate Ken for the Iowa Award, our state's highest honor. Again, those were the excerpts from Governor Ray's nomination letter for Ambassador Quinn. Thank you, Governor Ray. So now I'd like to introduce the next set of speakers, which will include Attorney General Tom Miller, who will speak on behalf of the Commission, followed by Ambassador Chuck Larson Jr. and State Senator Matt McCoy. So please help me in welcoming Attorney General Miller to the podium.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. And, what a great day. For Ken, who's been a friend of mine since we were in high school, or was it grade school? We grew up about 4 blocks away from each other. And I think, Ken, I probably have the great fortune of having known you longer than anybody in the room. And Ken was outstanding as a student and as a young person, just as he's been outstanding throughout his life. That's not a surprise to anybody in this room. He's a great student. He was a great friend, person of honor and integrity at that point in his life. What I think I will do is just spending a few minutes talking a little bit about his career in the State Department, because I think a lot of people are quite a bit familiar with the extraordinary things he did here in Iowa. But he had an equally or even greater career in the State Department. Ken told me when he graduated from college from Laureates, like I did, that he was choosing between law school and graduate school that would lead him to the State Department. And Ken, you would have been a terrific lawyer. I can attest to that. But the country has been so much better served by you being in the State Department than being a lawyer. He has had just incredible assignments in the State Department. His first was in Vietnam. He was stationed in Vietnam for a number of years during the Vietnam War. Part of that time, he was stationed in the part of Vietnam that borders Cambodia. It was dangerous, it was difficult, and he served, of course, oh so well. Other assignments have been in Geneva, I think as was mentioned, in the Middle East. He was the number 2 person, the deputy ambassador in the Philippines during the middle of his career. He served the 2 great geniuses of both parties on their staff, Henry Kissinger and Richard Holbrooke. Talent always seemed to find this man. He was and I forget the title, Ken, you can tell the people, but at one point in his career, he and his colleague served in the office immediately next to the Secretary of State, Secretary George Shultz at the time. And each of them had half the world. Through these 2 people, everything that came into the State Department and went out of the State Department was looked at and approved by them and checked with the Secretary of State. So they divided up the world. Ken had half the world. And you can imagine how demanding and pressure-packed and time-consuming this job was. And again, it's a mark of Ken's career, including this just enormous work ethic that he's had throughout his career and maintains to this day. I don't know how you do everything and work so many hours. He was, I think, very accurately called the architect of the modern state of Cambodia. Cambodia suffered so much for so long, for so many different reasons. And there was a time in the 90s when that could change, at least in a significant way, not a perfect way, but a significant way. And Ken at the State Department, I think maybe working for Holbrooke at the time, was the architect and worked with the Cambodians and the Americans and others and really put together the modern state of Cambodia, and then became the first ambassador of the United States to Cambodia and served in that position. As was mentioned, he served in a lot of areas of danger. For instance, when he was the deputy ambassador to the Philippines, his family, his wonderful family, traveled in one car and he traveled in another car in Manila because of the safety concerns for the family as well as for him. When he was the first ambassador to the modern state of Cambodia, there were bombs hitting your house and nearby from time to time. It was perilous, but of course, he never blinked. But beyond all these accomplishments, there are intangibles, there are judgments, there are instincts that people have. And he has enormous foresight and vision and instinct. And let me give you a little bit of an example of that. The State Department, like most organizations, is not big on dissenters. We all claim we are, but in practice, it's not encouraged all that much. But they do give an award at the State Department for the Dissenter of the Year, who had the most important and valuable dissent in the year. And I think you won that, the only person to win that twice, although the program may say 3 times. It's the only person to win it 3 times. Let me give you an example of some of his thinking. When he was very young in the State Department and had perhaps his first assignment on the border of Cambodia in Vietnam, at the time, the conventional wisdom was that the Vietnamese communists controlled the Cambodia communists, that they were subservient, that they followed the wishes of the Vietnamese communists. And Ken, talked to people in the community and went into Cambodia and could see how the 2 communist parties interacted. And the conventional wisdom was wrong. They were competitive, they clashed from time to time. The Vietnamese had no control over the Cambodia communists. And he wrote a paper explaining this. And he told me that periodically somebody from the Army or the CIA would come out, all the way out to see him, because they'd be interested in what he said. And he said the first thing they would do is engage him in conversation to see if he was a nut. And finding that he wasn't a nut, they would engage in a serious discussion. But the policy never changed. It turned out at great cost. You may recall when Henry Kissinger, Secretary Kissinger, was negotiating the peace treaty in 1972 in Paris. The Cambodian communists did something just absolutely outrageous, as they were fully capable of doing. And we blamed the Vietnamese communists because they controlled the Cambodian communists, right? Kissinger broke off the negotiations. A intense bombing campaign took place that shouldn't have happened. We lost months. The war could have been over more quickly had they learned from Ken. A couple years later, when Ken was serving under the staff of Secretary Kissinger, he said, Ken, you were right about the Cambodia communists and the Vietnamese communists. Just wish they would have listened to him at the time. And those of you that are my age remember the incursion, I think it was called, into Cambodia by our forces. Parrot's Beak was part of it, I think, that we sort of remember. And a couple months later, a group of senior Army officials came out, and they wanted to know, what was the aftermath of this? What happened? What did we gain? Obviously, there was some cost in doing that. And they had a group of people in Vietnam around a table. Ken was one of them. Ken sat at the end of the table because he was the junior person. And they went around the room, and everybody told the superiors what they wanted to hear. Oh, it really helped us. It was very beneficial. Glad you did it. They came to Ken, and Ken said, well, at first it helped us, but over time it hasn't. It's hurt us and strategically, and he explained why. And the assistant to the general who was conducting the conference came to him right away and said, Ken, we got to talk to you. We got to learn more from you, Ken. Never heard from him again. When we entered the war in Iraq, I was conflicted. I didn't know whether it was a good idea or not such a good idea. There were arguments both ways. So I called up Ken and wanted to have lunch with him, because I knew he would know more than I know. And he didn't take a position on the war, but he clearly laid out to me all the problems that the United States would have in Iraq in that kind of war. It turned out to be true. And he talked to me about intelligence gathering in that context and the perils and pitfalls of intelligence gathering in that context, all of which was prophetic. My only regret, Ken, is that you weren't National Security Advisor to the President or Secretary of State sometime during your career. I think you have that kind of quality of judgment and work ethic and capacity to do just extraordinary things. I'm proud that Ken is my longtime friend. I'm proud that he receives the Iowa Award. He truly is an amazing Iowan.
General Miller, Governor, Lieutenant Governor, Ambassador Quinn and family, an honor to be with you today. I've known Ken since I was probably 8 or 9 years old, and he's been a friend and a mentor and an advisor for all of my life. As General Miller said, Ambassador Quinn was raised in Dubuque and then started an early career with the State Department. But his career with the State Department, as we know, went far beyond what we would consider the typical ambassadorial service and the peace and tranquility of a European post, meeting with presidents and prime ministers at nightly receptions. During his 6 years in Vietnam, Ambassador Quinn flew over 100 combat missions, often before dusk or in what we call the last light, which is where our teams would go out and look for the enemy that was going to be attacking that night. Very, very dangerous missions. And as Congressman Boswell or Bob Myers would fully recognize, every night was a life or death mission. And Ambassador Quinn never shied from danger whatsoever. When stationed in Lebanon, he joined a UN team that traveled throughout the country and through Syria to Yasser Arafat's headquarters. At each checkpoint, they were met with heightened tension as the local militia, and you can all imagine the 50 caliber machine guns that are mounted on the back of Jeeps as Ken's traveling through the country. They weave their way through and they finally arrive at Arafat's compound. And Ken is quietly walking around the compound, collecting intelligence, and he sees this little shed, a small shed that could probably only hold about 2 people. And he sees streams of men going into this little shed, and he can't figure it out. So he goes over, and he's able to peer in, and he sees that it's the tunnel that leads to Yasser Arafat's headquarters down under a school, which is an obvious violation of the law of war. Ken then pulls the team together and gets their PLO escort and announces that it's time to depart. And they're quietly leaving the area and traveling back through a number of checkpoints. And along the way, one of the UN advisors jokingly tells the PLO escort that Quinn is an American. And the PLO escort, as you can imagine, his face goes deathly white. He becomes angry, and he recognizes that they've just had an American spy in the heart of their compound. And he has 2 choices. One, turn the spy over, and most likely he himself would be killed as well, or let the spy go, and hopefully they would both live. And as they come to the final checkpoint, Ken, as you can imagine, is filled with fear and anguish about what's going to happen. And the man made the decision to remain silent and let him through that final checkpoint, sparing both of their lives. And if you've seen the movie Argo, you can imagine this is what Ken did. And I do think that if Ben Affleck wants to have a sequel, this is the story that it would be. All joking aside, it is such a joy and privilege to celebrate with you, Ken, and your family this afternoon. Your career has been illustrious and absolutely remarkable. And I want to thank you personally for your service, and I congratulate you on this prestigious recognition.
Ambassador Quinn and your family, friends and colleagues, honored guest, it's a tremendous honor to stand before you this afternoon in acknowledgement of an outstanding Iowan. Ambassador Quinn exemplifies excellence in everything that he has set out to do and achieve in his ambitious life. I was first introduced to Ambassador Quinn right after John and Janice Ruan recruited Ken and Lisan to come home to Iowa following a very distinguished career with the State Department. Immediately, I recognized why the Ruan family wanted Ken Quinn to develop the mission and vision of the World Food Prize across our state our nation, and our world. At the last event, the World Food Prize held at the Iowa Capitol, we had more than 65 countries represented in the state of Iowa. Ken's career and his life experiences are quite remarkable. I describe Ken Quinn as the Iowa version of Forrest Gump. Ken always managed to find himself square in the middle of all the action. And I've often pondered why that was. Does Ken follow the action, or does he create it? The excellence which Ken so easily espouses professionally comes from his genuine commitment and mission to help feed a hungry world. Ken has always possessed a great humanitarian focus in all of his public service. That is one of the constant in his career. Whether advising governors, meeting with world leaders, or risking his life in dangerous missions, his goal was always to search for humanitarian solutions to nearly impossible problems. Norman Borlaug also knew he was leaving the World Food Prize in very capable hands and trusted hands. Ken possesses obsessive passion for his work. It's not unusual to get a 3 a.m. email from him. As a risk taker, he was always up for a new adventure. I believe this passion and drive has served as his waypoint, always guiding and propelling him to address every opportunity with his youthful idealism. I want to close my remarks with the Zen Buddhist text that reminds me of how Ken Quinn has lived his life. The master in the art of living makes little distinction between his work and his play, his labor and his leisure, his mind and his body, his education and recreation, his love and religion. Ken hardly knows which is which. He simply pursues his vision of excellence in whatever he does, leaving others to decide whether he is working or playing. To him, he's always doing both. Thank you, and congratulations, Ambassador Quinn.
Thank you, Attorney General Miller, Ambassador Larson, and Senator McCoy for those nice remarks. It's now my privilege to read a letter from Iowa's congressional delegation, which reads, Dear Governor Branstad and Iowa Centennial Memorial Foundation, we are honored to celebrate Ambassador Kenneth Quinn tonight as he accepts the prestigious Iowa Award. His distinguished career and unwavering devotion to promoting peace and ending world hunger makes him the ideal choice to join the ranks of fellow Iowa Award recipients, including President Hoover, Carrie Lane Chapman-Catt, and Dr. Norman Borlaug. For more than a decade, Ambassador Quinn has worked tirelessly to raise the global profile of the World Food Prize Foundation. His outstanding leadership has grown the profile of the World Food Prize Laureate Award Ceremony, the Borlaug Dialogue International Symposium, and the Global Youth Institute, while also promoting Iowa's agricultural industry. Ambassador Quinn's commitment to service goes well beyond his time at the World Food Prize. Whether it was his groundbreaking report on genocidal policies at the Khmer Rouge or serving as the director of Iowa Shares, sending medical professionals, supplies, and food to Cambodian refugees, Ambassador Quinn has always valiantly stood up for what is right. Ambassador Quinn's 30 years as an American diplomat were conducted with the highest integrity and devotion, earning numerous awards, including the White House Meritorious Honor Award and the Secretary of State's Award for Heroism and Valor. Ambassador Quinn was also honored as the only civilian to receive the U.S. Army Air Medal. As one of the most decorated Foreign Service officers of his generation, it is only fitting that tonight Ambassador Quinn receives the highest honor for any Iowan. Our warmest congratulations to Ambassador Quinn on an extraordinary career and this well-deserved honor. We join the Iowa Centennial Memorial Foundation in recognizing him for demonstrating what it means to be an exceptional Iowan. Sincerely, Senator Chuck Grassley, Senator Tom Harkin, Congressman Tom Latham, Steve King, Bruce Braley, and Dave Loebsack. Now please help me and welcome Governor Terry Branstad for a few remarks and the formal presentation of the Iowa Award. Governor?
Well, thank you all for joining us. Everybody in this room are distinguished Iowans. So this is a wonderful group. Mom, we have a few international former ambassadors from other places as well, but we're honored and proud to have all of you here for this very special occasion at this very special place to honor a very special Iowan, Ken Quinn. We're here today to honor an Iowan who embodies the values of the people of Iowa: service, sacrifice, integrity, and philanthropy. Those are just a few words that come to mind when reflecting on the career of Ambassador Ken Quinn. Before he was ambassador, Ken Quinn worked for Governor Robert D. Ray. At that time, I was serving as lieutenant governor of the state of Iowa. In fact, I had just become lieutenant governor in 1979, and on June 28, 1979, a storm system moved across from the northwest to southeast. Normally, tornadoes go from the southwest, but this one came from the northwest to the southeast, originating in North Dakota. I happened to be playing a softball game in Forest City, where I went to high school. But the storms came across, hitting Emmett and Kossuth counties, and in a span of an hour, from 5:38 p.m. to 6:38 p.m., EF3 tornado capable of producing winds from 135 to 165 miles per hour ripped through northern Iowa and did significant damage in the community of Algona. Another tornado, and this was an EF4, directly hit the town of Manson, Iowa, killing 3 and literally leveling the town. The storm system spawned 27 fierce tornadoes that day. As lieutenant governor, I had a responsibility to work to provide assistance because Governor Ray was on a trade mission in Romania. But Ken Quinn was able to get a hold of Governor Ray in Romania and got instructions that Ken should accompany me to do the on-site inspection of the damage in Algona and Manson. And following the governor's direction, Ken flew up to Algona and I met him there. And even the night before, actually, we're on the phone. I was at Sheriff Don Vold's residence in Forest City talking to Ken, strategizing what we needed to do. And so we agreed to meet in Algona and do the on-site inspection on behalf of Governor Ray, and we did that. The next day, Ken and I toured Algona, and we flew to Manson and surveyed the damage there. Those 2 tornadoes, well, with the other tornadoes that hit, caused $40 million in damages here in the state of Iowa. With Ambassador Quinn's help, we requested a presidential disaster designation from President Carter, and we received it. It was obvious then that Ambassador Quinn cared deeply about his fellow citizens of the state of Iowa. He had a great passion to serve and believed in working for a greater cause than himself. And this has been true throughout his career. Ambassador Quinn has displayed leadership in protecting the world's most vulnerable and worked for causes that ensure that they could be fed and that we were fighting for freedom and opportunity for refugees and helping welcome them to the state of Iowa. With Governor Bob Ray, Ambassador Quinn led Iowa Shares, which you've heard about, which rushed food and medical teams to the Thai border to feed thousands of starving Cambodian refugees. During his time with the United States State Department, Ambassador Quinn personally negotiated the first ever access by U.S. military search teams to a North Vietnamese prison and the first ever access to the entire country of Cambodia. His leadership role in starting the evacuation of Saigon as the Vietnam War concluded led to hundreds of thousands of more Vietnamese refugees being rescued so they might live in freedom. Promoting human rights and democracy has been a core value of Ambassador Quinn's entire career. As a diplomat, he stopped a woman from being tortured in Vietnam. He protected an endangered opposition politician in his embassy for 53 days and personally intervened to save the life of a leading opposition political leader in Cambodia. His work across the globe made him the only U.S. diplomat ever to be awarded, as you've heard on 3 separate occasions, the American Foreign Service Association Award for Intellectual Courage in Challenging Official Policy, including his refusing to implement the orders of a Secretary of State that he believed would leave his embassy staff vulnerable to jihadist terrorist attacks in Cambodia. Following his work in the Foreign Service, Ambassador Quinn returned home to Iowa to lead this great organization, the World Food Prize, that is housed in this beautiful building. By the way, he raised a lot of the money to renovate this building. And what a beautiful and wonderful facility it is, and what a fitting place to have this ceremony. Inspired by Dr. Norman Borlaug's innovation and the Green Revolution, Ambassador Quinn built the World Food Prize into the significant internationally recognized award that it is today. His passion for Dr. Borlaug's work and his continued dialogue on feeding the world helped get the resolution passed through the legislature to honor Dr. Borlaug with the bronze statue at Statuary Hall in our nation's capital. Lieutenant Governor Reynolds and I, along with many other Iowans, were honored to be in Washington, D.C. as Ambassador Quinn's work and passion were realized with the unveiling of the Borlaug statue in Statuary Hall. It's one of the highlights of my life to be there for that special event. Ken chaired the committee. And the committee members that helped with the Borlaug recognition, I think, are all here today. And it was done fittingly on the 100th anniversary of Dr. Borlaug's birth, March 25th of this year. Today, Ambassador Quinn becomes the 23rd Iowan to receive the Iowa Award. He joins John Ruan, Grant Wood, Carrie Lane, Chapman Catt, George Washington Carver, George Gallup, Norman Borlaug, and many others, and of course, Simon Estes, Bill Knapp, and Governor Robert D. Ray, all wonderful, distinguished Iowans who have received this award previously. And I'm just really proud to have the honor and the opportunity as governor of this state to present this award. It was a vision of Robert D. Blue, who was the governor of Iowa, when we had the centennial, to have the Iowa Award. With the support of the legislature, it was established, and now it is a distinct privilege to present this award to a very deserving and a great Iowan, Ambassador Kenneth Quinn.
Governor, Lieutenant Governor, you've done it again. I know people say that to you a lot, Governor, but when Governor Branstad and Lieutenant Governor Reynolds told me about this award the first time, I struggled to what to say. What do you say on this? And I said to them, I don't know what the right words are. And as I was getting ready for today, I thought, well, I'm going to have several weeks, so I can come up with something. I'll write it down. I won't be, but I'm stumbling again. Governor, from the bottom of my heart, on behalf of my wife, Lay Sun, sons Davin and Shandon, my daughter Kelly, thank you so much for this incredible honor. Lieutenant Governor, thank you for your wonderful words and all that we've done together. It's been a long journey, Governor, from that helicopter ride out there. I remember that. David Oman's here. He was there that night. We were in the Capitol. All the horns are going off. Take cover, but we were there trying to find Governor Ray and the hotel room in Romania. And, we finally got through. You had to call the long-distance operator and the overseas operator, the London interchange operator, and then the Bucharest operator, and then whatever town you were in, Governor, and finally the hotel. It's 2 a.m. There's some guy who speaks barely a word of English. And we're saying, Governor Ray, because, General Orr, we had to have the governor's authority to call out the guard that night. And the phone rings, and a woman answers it. And, staffers who are here understand, it wasn't Mrs. Ray who answered the phone. That's when you really have to make a diplomatic decision. And so I said, can I please speak to Governor Ray? I don't care who and she said, oh, you have the wrong room. Only that it was Governor Milliken's wife. I said, please don't hang up. And she went down the hall and knocked on the door and got Billy Ray up and got Governor Ray down, and Governor Bill Milliken still asleep in the bed. And I'm saying, and I'm trying to explain to the governor what's happening, and but it all happened. And you remember, I didn't know, I think people are always waiting for when Governor Ray was out of the state to do bad things, because that's when we had the prison riot as well. You remember at Fort Madison, and we had to have, where's Senator and Commissioner Noble was here, we had to call most of the guard to Fort Madison there. So we've been through a lot, Governor, and this wonderful public-private partnership we have. Thank you so much. Governor Ray, my goodness, it means so very much to me that you're here, that I would get this award. Thank you for your nominating me for this. The relationship that we had for those years and working together on all those refugee issues are the highlight, of my life and my career. Bill Knapp and Simon Estes and I were out at Iowa Public Television being interviewed by Dean Borg and on Iowa Press. And Dean Borg said to us, well, now, who do you most admire among Iowa Medal recipients or any Iowans or anybody? And I said, I've been a lot of places around the world. I've met presidents, secretaries of state, international leaders. But the 2 most inspiring persons I ever worked with or were near were Norman Borlaug and Bob Ray. And then Bill Knapp and Simon Estes answered, and they said the same 2 names. And that. John and Janice, our wonderful friendship for these past 15, 20 years It's flown by. You've been such wonderful friends to our entire family, and you have given me the opportunity to have the greatest retirement gig anybody could ever have. And it's amazing how your life changes on just 2 small conversations. Governor Ray says to me, "We sure could use a guy like you in Iowa. I'm back here." John and Janice say, "Let's discuss what it takes for you to come back home." Now, they were very persuasive. And then there was this enormous steak at the Palm. I mean, it was so spectacular. How could I ever say no? But that it has been, a joy of a lifetime. And our trip together to up the Mekong was just wonderful. Tom Miller, Mr. Attorney General, our memories of Dubuque and going to Loras Academy and Wahlert High School and Loras College. But, you all know, Tom is a great student, a great legal mind, a terrific person, but he had a jump shot to die for. And we used to play basketball up under the streetlight near our house. And, oh my gosh, you got it to Tom in the corner, it was 2 points every time. You got it to me, and it was highly questionable. But thank you for our friendship back to all those days, all these years, and that. I know Treasurer Fitzgerald is here, was also a member of the Centennial Commission. I'll say to all the members, thank you. I'm so humbled by this. But the real importance of your being here, of course, is that your daughter and my daughter Kelly were at Dowling at the same time and on the same state championship relay team. So, so I'm really glad you could be here today, and the other state elected officials as well. So thank you for being here, the legislative leaders, Senator Gronstal, all the members of the legislature who are here from both parties, Chief Justice Katie, thank you so much for being here. Members of the regents who are here as well. Ambassadors, my friend Mary Kramer, and President of the Senate, and ambassadors here. I want to introduce to all of you 2 other ambassadors who are here, who are wonderful friends from my career. Ambassador Bob Pearson, who is here, and Ambassador Carol Rodley, who are there. They're the ones from out of state, so please join me in welcoming them for being here. And you heard a little bit about that great moment in Geneva when finally we were able to break through and save the boat people. So Bob Pearson was there with Dick Holbrook at this great moment. They have been working in the State Department. We have been working so closely with them, with Governor Ray's staff. And once again, it's that, that bipartisan working together, the Republican governor, the Democratic political appointees brought this about. Carol Rodley was my deputy in Cambodia, and we served together there in these very, very difficult circumstances when we had no Marines, and all of the danger of that and the threats to our embassy. And our embassy was considered the most vulnerable because you could drive a truck bomb up to the front door without any trouble. And yet, through enormous amounts of her work, we're able to be considered later the most well-prepared. We might not have had all the fortifications. But when the moment came, you heard me that I have this award for dissent 3 times. The last time I got it, she and I got it together because we had to make a choice about whether we were going to accept the directives we were getting from the State Department, which in our view would leave all of our employees, both Cambodians and Americans, subject to that danger, or we had to write down on paper and sign our names to it and say, we refuse to do this. And then you send it in. And we did this, and she did that. And now there's a new, safe embassy in Phnom Pen, with Marines, with the setback that you can't blow up, and she got to be ambassador there for that. So Carol and Bob. So many friends are here, and I'm so grateful to all of you supporters, the things that we could do. A few people have come a long way from Washington, Jessica Edelman, David Lambert, Joe Swedberg, who's driven down from Minnesota. I always, whenever you hear Minnesota, I always say, it's Norman Borlaug's only mistake. He went to the University of Minnesota, but Joe's really from Iowa, even though he works in Minnesota. So you heard about all these other Iowa award winners, and there's one difference for all of them and me. I was born in the Bronx, New York, and kind of bounced around in the Midwest and ended up in Dubuque in August of 1956, 1 week before high school was to start. And my dad drove me to Laureates Academy, and they let us out early. My dad was supposed to come back and pick me up, and I walked out the door, and I didn't know where to go or how to get home. Where's Bob Holtz? Bob's here, over there. And I'm walking out, and Bob befriends me and kind of points me in the right direction. And so I said, how could it be a guy who didn't even know how to find his way home from school in Dubuque is here today with this honor? But 8 years later, when we graduated from Laureates, I still wasn't sure where I was headed. I got in my two-tone green 1955 Mercury, went up to the north end and across the bridge over to Wisconsin, up to Madison to take the Foreign Service exam, with hopeful that I could become a diplomat. But I can assure you that I had no thought of going to Vietnam or Cambodia. I was thinking of chandeliered ballrooms, London, Paris, Vienna, and I don't know what happened when I got there, but all of a sudden I'm in training, I'm learning Vietnamese, and I'm in a single-engine plane landing on a dirt road in the Mekong. I'm not even in the embassy in Saigon out there, and began this career. So I was going to write my autobiography, and people always say, oh, you should write a book. It'd be I have the title, From the Mississippi to the Mekong. And when, John, you were describing our trip, it made me think. So here I land in Sadek province. This is where our boat trip started. We got off in the market in Sadek, and there I spent 2 years as an advisor dealing with the Viet Cong insurgency, just as the Green Revolution is beginning, just as those first crops that Norman Borlaug had developed were arriving for farmers out there. And then as you keep going up the river, you come to Chowduck along the Tom Miller talked about and Ambassador Larson talked about, and near the mountains there. And then I spent time there. That's where I discovered the Khmer Rouge, the worst genocidal mass murderers of the second half of the 20th century. And you keep going across the border and up to Phnom Penh, where I ended up in the 90s, and the embassy there and dealing with them. And in between, I'd come back, but it seems like Indochina was always still involved. I'd work at the NSC and at the White House, and it was on Vietnamese refugees there, and with Governor Ray. And then I'd go back out, and finally, it got to the end and came back to take over the World Food Prize. But I learned a lot of lessons in Indochina and along that Mekong about America, about Americans, and about Iowa. I saw in that first district where I was in Sadek, I was 26 years old, and I was a civilian heading a 10-man, this was all guys, and military team. And I learned the incredible power of rural roads and new crops, new agricultural technology. That we couldn't get rid of the Viet Cong with bombs, with boots on the ground. But when we built new roads and we brought new agricultural technology, they evaporated. They went away. somehow that economic transformation undermined them in a way that we wouldn't have seen coming. It was a lesson that would stay with me for life. You know, I was with Bob Gates in 2008, and I mentioned the story to him, General Orr, and he said, every one of my commanders in Afghanistan says the same thing. Where the road ends, the insurgency begins. And it's true, where the road ends is where the hunger begins, and where the road ends is where the terrorism begins. And I learned that in a way. I mean, we should have known it growing up here, but it wasn't apparent. I learned about what it meant to be an American and the bond from being in combat. Because whether you were walking through the paddies or riding in the helicopter, when you heard over the radio that there were uniformed Sierras in trouble or under fire or pinned down, U.S., uniformed Sierras, U.S., you went. And you put yourself at risk. Even though you'd never met them, you didn't know who they were, you didn't know their name, you didn't know the color of their skin, you didn't know their ethnicity, their religion, or anything. All you had to know was that they were Americans. And you went. Because you knew that they do the same thing for you. That's the bond we have among us. It's hard to see sometimes here. But in that danger, it became clear. I learned you could have more impact working in villages sometimes than in those ballrooms, and we're changing policy from Iowa than Washington. I learned the power of small teams and what they could do. So glad so many from Governor Ray's staff are here. What a terrific team we had in doing that. From our embassy in Phnom Penh, from Dick Holbrook's office, where Bob Pearson and I worked together, and at the World Food Prize. You know, when I came here, there was only had one employee, and there were maybe 50 people who came to the World Food Prize from outside Iowa. She's back there, Jan Douglas is there. And now we have more people on our team, but it's still a small team that's here. And whatever I could do, whether it's in Cambodia or Vietnam, at the State Department or here, it's only because I have such wonderful people who work with me and for me. So we're all the World Food Prize staff. Some are standing, stand up, or come forward, raise your hands. There, that's it. Thanks. Mashal Hussein, our Vice President, Megan Forgrave, Libby Crimmins, Judith Pym, Lisa Fleming, Catherine Swoboda, Crystal Harris over here. Who am I missing? Nicole Barreca, we're on that. Stephen Lauer, who have I missed? Keegan Kautsky, Ed Redfern, Nikki Schissel, who's the head of our arts. Who have I missed? I have to count where they sit. Have I got them all? Okay. Anyway, they're terrific. But the most important small team is the Quinn family. They're my inspiration, their steadfastness, their motivation, their love that sustained me in every assignment, every adventure. Laysun, Davin, Shandon, and Kelly, always there. Sharing the danger, willing to make sacrifices so we could represent our country. You heard that the kids would ride in the other car behind me because I was the target and didn't want to have your family in the car when it got hit. What you didn't hear is that they were smaller and they kept telling the bodyguards that they wanted to play with the Uzis that were back there. And they come, Dad, the bodyguards won't let us play with the Uzis. Tell them about that. If you had seen Laysun and Kelly serving food to all the Americans who were off in the Cambodiana hotel, the whole hotel staff had left. All the American citizens would be evacuated out of Cambodia, and they were there dishing the food out to keep Americans going. Or Davin and Shandon over with the fledgling Cambodian Olympic swim team, teaching kids how to swim so they could go to Atlanta. Yeah. So I've had some memorable moments. You've heard about Geneva, Sakeo, Iowa shares, and calling Washington when that last Khmer Rouge, we had destroyed the Khmer Rouge. The last one surrendered because of our opening roads and agricultural enhancements. Unveiling Dr. Borlaug's statue. That'll always be one of the thrills, Governor. Thank you for allowing me to have the role in that. But you know, I was down in Grinnell with some students, and they said, what's your biggest moments? What do you remember from your diplomatic career and that? So that, and you know, that Ambassador Larson, Senator McCoy, that you described for me, and thank you so much for what you've done and for this. I'm so forever grateful. And I thought to these students, and I said, you know what I remember most are the hugs. Remember the father of a 10-year-old boy in Sadek whose son had been shot in the stomach. And I came upon them, and we threw him in the car, and I drove through the city and took him to a hospital. Somehow the doctor saved his life. This man couldn't speak any English, a very simple man, and he just came up and threw his arms around me. Remember the hug of an American Air Force sergeant who was drowning in a canal, and I went in and grabbed him and pulled him out. And he said, sir, you saved my life. Remember that hug, Governor Ray, in your office of a Vietnamese refugee had written, said, nobody will help me, I'm stranded. We got him out, got him in the pipeline. He came to America, he came to Iowa. Remember the hug of a Cambodian American official who was trapped out during the Civil War and called, and could I come and get him, and driving through where the fighting's going on with just the flag on my car flying. And I saw him later, and he had tears running down his face, and he came up and put his arms around me and hugged me, and he said, now I know what it means to be an American. I remember it's not quite a hug, but I remember sitting with Dr. Borlaug in a couple of days before he died, and squeezed my hand and thanked me for what we had done together at the World Food Prize. But what I remember most is my wife and I hugging our children. You heard about the rocket that hit our house, and then it was ringed in gunfire. And we threw our kids on the floor, and Layson and I laid on top of them. And prayed as hard as it's possible for a person to pray, that the bullets that come through the windows would kill us and not them. See, it was in Indochina that I learned how much I love my children. So the final thing I want to say is that countries and people and cultures are defined by the obligation or sense of obligation they have to other people within their borders and outside. And I'm so proud to be from a state where our great heroes, whose pictures and names you can see upstairs in the Iowa Gallery, are all people who saw their obligation to confront hunger and suffering far beyond our borders, and to assist those who are in desperate need, who are suffering. 7 of the 22 persons who have received this medal fit that category. Individuals involved in global food security. So I'm so proud to have my name added to that group. I'm so proud to receive this medal. I'm so proud to be an American, and I am so very, very proud to be an Iowan. Thank you.
see if I can get myself composed here again. Ambassador, what an incredible, incredible life of service to both you and your family. And I could listen to you recount your stories and your experiences for hours and hours on end. So on behalf of everyone here today and the citizens of Iowa, once again, we just want to say thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for selecting Iowa to retire. Thank you, John and Janice. Good job. And just simply congratulations. Congratulations. So I turned to Bill Knapp, though. I said, there's one other little piece about that Iowa press that was pretty exciting, and that's when I was watching it and I saw the ambassador and Simon and Bill sing the corn song. So I said to Bill, I turned around and I said, are you singing with us tonight? But I know one of the three definitely is singing. So Simon, it's my honor to welcome you to the podium. So please, Simon Estes.
Well, I don't know what to say after all that I've heard from all of these accolades that have been bestowed upon a great man, a great humanitarian, a man of love, courage, faith, determination, and dedication. I'm so grateful that you and I came back to Iowa. I was out there in Boston University, and a professor there and my wife said a number of years ago, Simon, why don't you come back and help the children in Iowa? And I didn't know I'd come back and meet you and Norman Borlaug, but at any rate, I'm honored to have returned to Iowa like you have returned to Iowa. I admire you for so many reasons, Ambassador Quinn. You have cared about people all over the world, and you've cared about people in Iowa. Whether they were small or big, you loved them all. And if all husbands and wives and parents would be like you two have been to your children, this would be a much better world and a safer world. So I personally thank you because I love my children, and it's just great that you folks have really sacrificed for your children. And you three young children, you are truly blessed to have a mother and a father like you have. I don't know what else to say because it has all been said, except that I'm deeply humbled and honored that Governor Branstad asked me to come and sing for you. And it says on the program, a selection. And I've been thinking over the last, well, when Governor Branstad mentioned it to me a number of weeks ago, I thought, what am I going to sing and how much am I going to sing? And I still didn't know what I was going to sing. Nobody had told me. So when I saw the program, it said, a selection by Simon Estes. So I'm going to sing a selection, but I'm not going to let any of you get off because Norman Borlaug also loved the corn song from Iowa. So I think we'll all have a chance to thank Ambassador Ken Quinn by, when I finish singing my first and only selection alone, we're going to all sing the Iowa corn song because Norman Borlaug loved that song. I was happy to have sung for him many years ago, and Ambassador Quinn loves it too. So I'm just going to sing something very, very short because it's getting late, but Ambassador Quinn, I personally congratulate you also on this wonderful award from Iowa, from the governor and the state of Iowa. You're a great human being, and may God continue to bless you and your family and protect you. So I'm just going to sing God Bless America. I think that's okay. And then when I finish that, you all have to help me, and we're going to sing the Iowa corn song. And we've already practiced it. Bill Knapp and I practiced it. Bill Knapp and I practiced it with Ambassador Quinn, but the three of us will just still remember we're singing it together because we rehearsed it on television live. Okay, here we go. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light mountains, to the prairies, to the oceans, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. This is the new Iowa trio. Here's what we'll do. We'll just get right here. And
I'm not to be too near the microphone.
so we're going to sing the corn song because we practiced it together, didn't we?
When are you leaving town?
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to kick me out of town?
The corn growers notice now. I don't know.
Okay.
Kirk
let me see.
Leeds here. I'm in trouble. Oh, God.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Word from Iowa, Iowa, state of all the land, join in every hand. Word from Iowa, Iowa, that's where the tall corn grows.
The Iowa Corn
Our
Trio.
new trio,
Here.
okay, get him in there. The Iowa trio, all right? Just the beginning. Thank you. And thank you, Norman.
Well, it doesn't get much better than that. This state is truly, truly blessed with so much talent. So thank you all for being here. You're all a part of that. This does conclude the formal part of the program, but we invite you all to stay and join us for the reception. So congratulations again, and thank you. Thank you.